Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Gaming.com video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news, which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to be starting things out with Apple, specifically that the company are being sued because of the latest feature in iPhone devices, specifically that the CPUs will be lower clocked thanks to an iOS update, which Apple claims is designed to protect and prolong devices. We'll get to that in a moment. And then Nvidia are ending support for 32-bit operating systems. First, however, I am starting to test a new format. Let me know what you think about this. Specifically that I'll be doing a couple of shorter news videos rather than one long video, because some people say that it's easier to find certain news stories because otherwise, you know, the titles are just not able to fit in all of the news stories, therefore they miss things. So some people have asked me to do this. Let me know what you think. Normal ways, you can comment in the video, you can email me at paul@redgamingtech, you can message me on Facebook, which admittedly I've been really sucky at to answer recently, however I am starting to catch up. But anyway, let's just go right to the news. So, for those who missed it, Apple were accused and then subsequently admitted to be slowing down the performance of iPhone devices after they reached a certain age. Specifically, this is down to the battery. Naturally, as lithium-ion batteries age, they are less capable of producing the amount of current, power, as when they were new. So what happens is, Apple released a feature. I'll leave this to your discretion of whether you want to believe it's a feature, which is either for altruistic purposes or for ill intent. I'll leave that to your imagination and decision making. That essentially reduced the clock speed, the frequency of the device's processor based upon the number of cycles that the battery had gone through. Now, this originated on Reddit, and then subsequently it was tested by numerous people, including the author of Geekbench. And we did cover this in depth yesterday, but Apple then released a statement confirming this was true, claimed it was a feature, and users were not happy. There are multiple reasons behind their less than stellar reception, including Apple did not disclose this originally. It is not a feature that you can opt out of with your phone. Third, because Apple are not taking your device into account, specifically the performance of your device. Instead, it's just taking a number of battery cycles. It's an arbitrary number. In other words, it's not been disclosed yet, so it could be, 500 cycles, it could be 1,000 cycles. We're not 100% sure at the moment of the time I'm recording this. So we'll find that. I'm sure we'll find that out pretty soon. Instead, it's because it's just taking the number of cycles rather than the performance of your battery. For example, different climates, like if you live in a really cold climate compared to, let's say, a more temperate climate, or perhaps if you take really good care of your battery, you know what I'm saying. Your device might be very different to someone else's device, even if you were to purchase the phone at exactly the same time. So your device might be absolutely awesome, like your battery might be almost as good as new, perhaps, a little bit worse, obviously, but still within the realms of acceptability. Bob's device, who perhaps lives in a different region of the world, or perhaps just doesn't even take care of it, well, that battery just plain sucks. And therefore, obviously, it can't simply live up to the expectations of the user. The fourth issue, and this one is perhaps the most damning of all, because this wasn't disclosed, and the fact that the device, the processor specifically, is a very custom design, users are questioning why wasn't a more robust design used, which is better able to handle less stellar voltages that the battery are putting out. Anyway, as I said, we discussed this at exhaustive depth yesterday, excuse me. So now Apple are facing what was inevitable, lawsuits. And these come from California, and there are also an additional lawsuit, which is a class action lawsuit. Both of these actually are class action lawsuits. But another lawsuit is happening from Illinois, Ohio, North Carolina, and Indiana. And those models range from iPhone 5 to iPhone 7s. And they are, of course, accusing Apple of deceptive and unethical practices, and claiming that the firm has engineered the updates to purposely slow down or throttle performance of the speed. And essentially, these accusations are also mirrored by residents of Los Angeles. We have Stefan Bogdanovich, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, as well as Dakota Spies. And they are being represented by a law firm which is Wilshire law firm, and they are filing a lawsuit with the US District's Court for the Central District of California. And once again, they are accusing Apple of very much the same thing, and they are demanding, in the lawsuit, replacement of the old iPhone, compensation for loss of use and loss of value, purchasing new batteries, and overpayments because users did not get what they paid for. So, of course, you can, by all means, replace the battery of an iPhone. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just, like, you know, popping out the batteries of your remote control. And the other issue is a lot of people just aren't comfortable with doing that. Now, of course, you could take that to your local store, and that's fine. And I'm sure that, you know, you've got probably a mobile phone store in your region, perhaps even a little, you know, stall outside the market or something that would happily do that for you. The problem is, A, a lot of the batteries that are being sold, the ones on like Amazon or whatever, they suck. And secondly, and perhaps more telling of all, it's costing you money. Imagine your battery is still reasonably okay, an update happens, you didn't know about it, so you've updated your phone, you're like, oh cool, I've got a new update. You know, you update your device immediately, really happy you've got new features, perhaps thinking there's going to be bug fixes or perhaps even better performance, and then you're like, wait, what? Why is my phone going a bit slower? And of course you just think, well, you know, it's an iPhone 6 or whatever, and, you know, apps of course become more demanding and whatever. Okay, fine. I guess I'll upgrade, and then that's the route a lot of users have gone, and obviously that frustrates people. Really, the biggest issue here is that there was no opt-out, app users were not informed, and it just kind of went under the radar. And obviously that is a recipe to cause people to become cynical of your motives. I'm sure if Apple had said, hey, we're releasing a feature on the phone, they had been upfront about it and said, look, we realise that some of our phones, you know, they reboot because, you know, the batteries have become old. So you've got two options. One, you can take it into a, you know, local store or replace the battery yourself. Hey, here's a link where you can buy the battery. That's down to you. It's not covered under your warranty, but you can do that if you desire. Or you can enable this feature that we've we've added to the new version of iOS that will reduce the performance of the processor, but you will get a more stable environment if your device is having issues. So it was an optional extra. You could enable it or disable it at your leisure, and perhaps after a certain amount of cycles, you know, the phone popped up and said, hey, we've noticed that the phone is perhaps crashing a little bit. We advise you to do this. Or perhaps if the phone had detected that it's had a couple of hard crashes, it would enable that mode automatically. Apple would not be getting in trouble here, I don't think. Yeah, it would probably get the odd person complaining here or there, but generally speaking, I think people would be, you know, quite receptive to it. This, however, falls very much under the table and obviously is upsetting people. I'm going to leave it down to you to decide. Once again, I've said this before, but I'm going to leave it to you to decide whether you think it was a, I guess, cash grab is the best way to describe it, or whether it was Apple trying to put the interest of customers at heart. Unfortunately, this is really blown back in their faces, and we've heard news, of course, that the iPhone 8 hasn't sold as well as what they'd expected. The iPhone X isn't selling as well as expected. And it's kind of weird because Apple are in this really dual good PR and bad PR at the moment, because the company have just introduced new rules which require apps to disclose the odds of loot boxes, which is phenomenal. I mean, I think that's a really positive thing that the company have done. Kudos to Apple for doing that. I think that's amazing. Personally, I think that the Xbox platform, the PlayStation 4, the Switch, basically all platforms should enforce that rule. Because obviously if like something's 1 in a million, then you might be less inclined to throw down a couple of bucks. But if something's like 1 in 25 that you get a really cool item or whatever, then okay, then you know that and you can make some decisions. And I think it would help to open things up, but that's a different discussion for another time. But this news with the slowing down of devices is really not a good look for Apple at all. So once again, I'm going to leave it down to your imagination to how this is going to go, because even if the lawsuits aren't successful, I think Apple might be a little more cautious. And topping this video off, 32-bit operating systems will no longer be supported by Nvidia after the R390 drivers. So this is not just going to be a thing which affects Windows, just to clarify. So if you're about to comment, oh well, I use Linux, ha ha ha, well, not so much, because this affects Windows 10, 7, 8, plus 8.1 for those poor unfortunate souls who are using 8, Linux, and also FreeBSD, and this will affect all of its GPU architectures. Now, before you panic, there will be a small amount of support which remains until January 2019. However, this is specifically for critical security vulnerabilities or major crashes. So, for example, if there's a major glaring problem and you find that your Geforce driver suddenly allows the installation of spyware on your system. I'm not saying this is a fault that currently exists. I'm just saying if it was discovered, then this would be resolved. To be honest, I don't blame Nvidia here. I mean, I personally, I don't know anyone that has a 32-bit operating system anymore. There was that grey area for a while where I think it was like Windows 7. I think it was Windows 7, especially at the early part of Windows 7, where like 32-bit OSs, those keys were much cheaper. And so you would get a lot of devices which had 4 GB or less RAM that would only have a 32-bit key. But now that's no longer the case. Like pretty much everyone I know has 32-bit Windows thrown in the bin. It's all 64-bit, so I don't think most people who are gamers are really going to be affected by this. After all, if you're a gamer, realistically, you're probably going to want more than 4 GB of system memory. And let's also be honest, if you've got a modern graphics card which is capable of playing a game which is more demanding, let's say for the sake of argument in this video, The Witcher 3, which isn't amazingly demanding, but it's fairly demanding to get running at like 1080p with decent settings, you're probably going to have at least a GTX 760 minimum, and most likely you're going to have something perhaps even better. You could maybe have like a GTX 960 or something like that, and you're probably going to have like a reasonable processor in there, maybe like an i5 of some generation. Even if you've got like a 2500K, you're not really going to be using a 2500K with 4 GB of RAM. Let's just be really honest now. So I personally think that's fine. At the end of the day, there is only a certain amount of resources a company has. So I, for one, welcome the nuking of 32-bit. Let it die, let it fade away into obscurity, unless it's like an office computer, in which case who the hell cares? But let's face it, you don't need the latest Geforce driver to run Word. With all of that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.